This is Gail with Beaded Jewelry Diva, and today we are going to be making this Rivoli pendant. As you can see, I've used some wire weaving, I've used some wire wrapping, and this project I think is a whole lot of fun, and I hope you agree. So you are going to learn to make this particular project, and what I'm also going to do is show you an easy way to use these connectors with the ball chains to put on your own clasps. So, if you're ready, let's get started. But before you do, if you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you don't already do so. Alright, let's go and see what we need to get this done. You will need the following. I'm using copper wire, and I have 20 gauge, 26 gauge, and 18 gauge. I have a pair of flat nose pliers. You can also use chain nose. I have a pair of flush cutters. I have a dowel that's about 5 millimeters. I have a Sharpie. I have a pair of round nose pliers. I have my Rivoli, and this is about 14 millimeters. You can use 16 millimeters as well. I have an assortment of pearls. Right now I'm using the crystal pearls, and I'm also using some copper beads. These are all in the 2 to 4 millimeter size range, and I also have another forming tool. I'm using a bottle of nail polish. You just need something that's roughly an inch in diameter. For the first step, we're going to create our form. I've got a piece of wire. This is 18 gauge. It's about 8 or 9 inches long, and I'm going to form it around my form. So I'm just wrapping it around. I'm going to wrap it around twice. And where they meet up, I am going to find about the middle of where they meet up, which is about right under my thumb. I'm going to take my Sharpie, and I'm going to mark it. Take it off the mandrel, or off the form, I should say. I've got my flat nose pliers, and I'm going to the first mark on the outer coil, and I'm going to bend it up, roughly a 90-degree angle. I'm going to do the same thing with the other one, the other mark, bend it up, roughly 90-degree angle. And I'm going to go ahead and straighten these off camera, and then I'll be right back. I've got these straightened up, and what I'm going to do now is I've got about a foot of the 26 gauge wire, and I'm going to wrap it around one of the upper wires. This is going to be our bail. I'm going to wrap it around twice, and I've got a little bit of a tail just mainly to hang on to. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get my wires as close together as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap my wire, my 26 gauge, around both of the 18 gauge wires. So I'm going to wrap it 3 times, which will give me a pretty good secureness. And be careful not to overwrap your wires so they don't wrap on top of each other. You want this to be pretty neat. So now I've got this, and what we're going to do is we are going to do a modified sumac weave. You may recognize this from my video where I'm teaching patterns with 2 base wires. If you need a refresher on this, go ahead and take a look at that video, but I'm just going to show you a real basic on how to do it here. Alright, so I've got my wires pretty close together, and what I'm going to do is first thing is to put my 26 gauge wire through the 2 wires, wrap it up and over both wires. So I'm going behind the back. Try to keep this in focus for you. And I'm going up between the 2 wires. Then I'm wrapping over both wires, going between the 2 wires, wrapping over the top wire, behind both wires in the back, and then up and between the 2 wires. So if I compress it together, it looks like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do this for about 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so I've finished my wrapping, and up at the top I went ahead and wrapped it twice. So that's just to really secure it. And right now I'm going to clip this wire on the back. And we've got it looking like this, and don't worry if your circle looks like it's out of round or something. You won't notice it with this particular project. So I'm going to take my dowel, and I'm just going to wrap it over. So I'm just wrapping it over. Until it looks more or less like this. I'll refine the shape if I have to, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these 2 wires through the hoop, or through the form. So it looks like this. So the wires are coming out the front. Now I'm going to take my flat nose pliers for leverage, and I'm going to move the 2 wires closer. So what I'm doing is I'm drawing the bail closer to the frame. So this is what I've got it looking like. Now I'm going to take the wires and move them over the frame. And I am going to try to make this as neat as possible. And it may take a little bit of work to get it done, but you're going to wrap it around once really well. Then you're going to take a pair of pliers and cut, or a pair of cutters and cut. Then you'll go ahead and flatten this some. Now it might shift and move a little bit. Just go ahead and try to move it back into position. And I'm going to go ahead and do this, do the other side, and then I'll be right back. This is what it looks like so far. So you can see that I've gone ahead and neatened these up a little bit, and I've also clipped that tail end of that other wire. Now I've got some 20 gauge wire. I've got about 8 inches of it. And the first thing I'm going to do is secure it to the frame. Doesn't have to be super neat, but you know, try to keep it as neat as possible. So secured to the frame, cut off the little tip so it doesn't get in your way. And now what we're going to do is work on securing the frame so that it doesn't flop around. What I'm going to do is first go ahead and twist the wire through the hoop. Push this back up, and I'm going to wrap it around and then through the hoop again. So it looks like this. Now this part doesn't have to be super neat. This part is going to be a very organic look. So, you know, don't worry about it being super neat other than up around here. Now what I'm going to do is create a bit of a swirl. To do the swirl, I'm going to take my finger, I'm going to place it over the wire, I'm going to hold it down firmly, and then I'm going to move the hoop. So I'm not moving my finger, I'm moving the hoop. And what you're going to get is the start of a spiral. Now I'm going to go ahead and spiral it up one more time, and I'm still just holding on to it and then moving the loop, or the hoop, the circle, the frame. So I've got something like this. Now I'm going to go ahead and take this, move it through the circle, frame, and then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. So I'll show it to you one more time, and then I'll go ahead and do a bunch more off camera. So let's see. hold on with your finger. So I'm just holding on, and then move the frame. So that forms a little bit of a loop. Then you can make it bigger. You can leave it like that, or you can make it bigger. So I've got one that looks like this. And I'm going to once again put it through. Now I'm going to do this all the way around. Now I've made it most of the way around, and so I ended this piece of wire and I attached a new piece, again about 10 to 12 inches, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around a second time. So I'm just going to go ahead, and make my loops same way that I did previously. And what I'm doing is I'm filling in a little bit. So usually I do at least 2 rounds all the way around to go ahead and give it a little bit more thickness, I guess you'd want to call it. And also to take care of, like, this part looks like it's a little bare or something compared to this part. So again, go ahead and go around, make some more loops, and I'm going to show you something. If you're having problems with these kinds of loops, take a pair of round nose pliers. Go ahead and grasp them somewhere towards the tip-ish. And go ahead and make a loop this way. So just loop it around. And when you do that, obviously remember to go ahead and wrap it around the wire as well, the base wire. So I'm going to go ahead and make some more loops, and I'll be right back. By the time you're done, it's going to look something like this. I mean, obviously it's not going to be exactly the same as mine because, the whole point about this is to be very organic. And what I'm going to do, and I see a stray wire up here that I'm going to tuck in more. If for some reason you have some loops that are out of place that you don't like or something, it's very easy. All you have to do is take your pliers and move them some. All right, I've got myself 2 26 gauge pieces of wire. They're about 5 inches long, and now's the time that we're going to start attaching the Rivoli to our frame. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find a spot and I'm going to attach the wire. So somewhere towards the top, let's see, and I'm going to wrap the wire around. You're pretty much not going to end up seeing this. So let me go ahead and get it wrapped. I like to wrap it 3 times for security. And I also like to wrap it neatly because our beads are going to end up covering this. But here I've got it looking like this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to string on 1 4mm bead. And the reason I'm doing this is if for whatever reason I didn't wrap enough into the center or whatever, and my Rivoli doesn't fill this whole area, I don't want a bunch of wire showing, a bunch of naked wire showing. So I'm just going to go ahead and string my wire through the holes in the Rivoli. So you've got some holes. And I'm going to make sure I'm on the correct side, which I'm not. There we go. So this is my front. I've got it looking like this. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to go ahead and string on a 4mm bead. And in your case, you may need a 2mm bead, a 3mm bead. You may need 2 3mm beads or whatever. You're just going to have to go by what your design looks like. So I've got it roughly looking like this. And I can see that it's not quite in the center. And I can adjust this a little bit later on, but I want it fairly close to being in the center. So I'm going to take my wire and I'm going to wrap it around the frame. And actually what I like to do is I like to wrap it around some of these individual wires. So you can see that I'm wrapping it around one of the loops. And this, I think, makes a more secure hold. Well, I actually ended up fairly well in the center, but what you can do is, if for whatever reason you're not centered, say you're way over to more than one side, just go ahead, take your bead, and move it some. Now be careful that you don't do too much at one time. What you're trying to do is just gently move the Rivoli closer to the center. And if you have to, move the other bead a little bit, you can. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to attach the bottom set of holes, and it's going to be very similar to the way that I attached the top set of holes. So you can see my Rivoli is more or less centered. And what I'm going to do now is actually the fun part. I'm going to sew on my beads. I think I mentioned again earlier, if I wanted to use different kinds of beads like the Swarovski crystals or fire polished or whatever, you could. Before I forget to mention, I did attach another piece of 26 gauge wire, and this one is about 15 to 18 inches long. I'm going to use it to go ahead and sew on my pearls or my beads. So I've got one, and I'm going to move it on down. I'm going to decide where I want it. I like it right about there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my end of it and I'm going to move it through that loop. Then I'm going to pull it tight without, putting any kinks or anything in it. So then it looks like this. I'm going to come around the back. I'm going to grab another bead. This time I think I'm going to grab one of the little tiny 2mm pearls. And actually I think I'm going to grab 2 of them. So I'm going to move it up to the top of the frame, and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take them and I'm just going to use the wire to sew through a convenient loop. So it looks like that. Now I'm going to go a little bit further down, and I'm going to repeat. I'm just going to take random beads. I think this time I'll take a copper bead and do the same thing. And then you're just going to go ahead and sew on your beads. Okay, this is the finished look. I went ahead and I used up all my 17 inches of wire that I had with the 26 gauge. Then I added another piece because I didn't think I had enough beads on it, so I went around this a couple of times, just adding beads here and there until I got a look that I liked. So that is pretty much the finished look for this particular pendant. I want to show you another one though. This is another one that I did, and this one is actually oxidized. And it's hard to tell because this one is actually much brighter in person than it is on screen. But I have some oxidized versions of it, and I think it looks kind of cool. Now, one other thing that I'm going to show you how to do real quick is when it comes to chains. Now, I love these ball chains because they're nice and inexpensive, and they're, easy to use, but I absolutely hate these connectors. But I figured out a way to go ahead and use like hook and eyes and put on my own kind of clasps very easily. I'm going to show you how to do that. I went ahead and strung my chain onto the pendant, and then I put on the connector on the end just like normal. Then I've gone ahead and strung a 3mm bead onto a head pin, then just insert it into the connector and then pull. At that point, you can just go ahead and make a wrapped loop or make whatever it is you want. Just make sure that you've got it where you want it. So I'm just going to make a wrap loop real quick. I'm going to put on my clasp, which I made. It's just your basic hook and eye clasp that I went ahead and embellished with some wire wrapping of the beads. So put this on and then close. So wrap it closed. And there we go. We have an easy alternative to these. Like I said, I hate absolutely putting them on myself because it's just a pain. So I've done an eye on the end, on the other end, and voila, I have a clasp that kind of goes with my pendant. So I hope you've enjoyed today's class. If you have, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you don't already subscribe to my YouTube channel, I hope that you'll do so. And meanwhile, this is Gail with Beaded Jewelry Diva saying have yourself a great day. Bye!